Greetings, folks. As we deepen our bonds today, we are in the book of Revelation. We have a question that will attempt to answer the question, who are the 144,000? It's a question that has been asked by many people in Christianity, and there are many scholars and theologians who have tried to answer this question. And today I'll take this opportunity also to microscopically look at this group, the 144,000, and try to use the Bible itself to answer who they are and what they comprise of. There are basically 2 or 3 passages where we find this group recorded. The first one being Revelation chapter 7 from verse 1 to verse 8. The second one being Revelation chapter 14 verses 1 to 5, and also Revelation 15 verses 2 to 4. Even though in Revelation chapter 15 you will not find the number 144,000, but when you look at the characteristics that are being portrayed there, you realize that it is that same group, the 144,000. And the question is, who are they? Now, when you go to Revelation chapter 6, the last verse, there is a question that is being asked there. You know, it is recording the last day events from verse 12. The events, the signs of the times. And from verse 14, we find Jesus now coming. That is the second advent. And the wicked ones, running to the mountains and asking the mountains to befall on them. And then there's a question now that is asked now in verse 17. Who shall be able to stand? So Revelation chapter 7 is coming as an interlude between Revelation chapter 6 and the Revelation chapter 8 to answer the question that has been asked in Revelation chapter 6 verse 17, who shall be able to stand? That is where we now see the 144,000. So in other words, the 144,000 are the ones who will be able to stand during the time when many will be running to the mountains, running away from the glory of Jesus when he returns. Chapter 6 verses 12 to verse 17, it also records the great tribulation that is going to happen, and that same tribulation is the one that is recorded in Matthew chapter 24 verse 21. Christ speaks about it, as well as Daniel chapter 12 from verse 1, where you see after Michael stands, there is a great tribulation that is going to take place. That is the same tribulation that is being recorded here in Revelation chapter 6, the last verses of chapter 6. Now, these are 144,000. When you read from Revelation chapter 7 as well as Revelation chapter 14, they are portrayed as virgins. Now, one thing that I also want you to understand is that when we are now dealing with Revelation, we are dealing with symbols. The Revelation was written symbolically. I'm not going to explain the reason why. It is going to be another topic for another day. But most of the things that are written in Revelation, they are symbolic. So we need to interpret the symbols as the Bible explains them. So when the Bible says they are virgins, it simply means that these are pure people who have not been defiled, by the other doctrines. They are living in the time when there are doctrines that are coming from the kingdom of Satan that are sprouting in the church, and these guys, they are not affected by those. They are maintaining the pure doctrine, which is the biblical doctrine of Christ. So they are portrayed as virgins. They are clean, they are not defiled. And we are also told in Revelation chapter 14 that they follow the lamp. To follow the lamp, it simply means that these people, their spiritual lives are attached to Christ, because Christ is the lamp. So they are attached to Christ all the days of their lives, 24/7. Their minds, their hearts, they are all concentrated on Christ and nothing else. And we are told that these guys are also redeemed from the earth. These are the people that are going to be redeemed from the earth without facing death. It is the same group that is going to see Jesus coming without ever facing death. And that is also going to be translated. We are also told that they are the first fruits. In other words, on the final harvest, when Christ is now harvesting the redeemed of all ages, these are the first fruits that are presented as the first fruits of the final harvest, and they are also faultless, as it is explained in the chapters that I've given. We are also told that they are sealed according to Revelation chapter 7. These are the people that receive the seal before the angels, release the winds, which are the strifes and commotion, to come and disturb the ones who have rejected God. These are the ones who have been sealed, and we are also told that they are spotless, they are clean, they have accepted the righteousness of Christ, and they are not found wanting when they are put on the scale. These are the characteristics of the 144,000, the multitude or the number of the people that are going to be found alive, the righteous saints, when Jesus is going to come for the second time. Now, the biggest or the follow-up question that usually comes after we explain the 144,000 is it a literal number? Remember, we are talking about revelation, symbols, etc. Then the question is, are these literal? Are they really 144,000 literally, or it's a symbolic number? And this is where I'm going to spend much time. We need to understand whether they are a literal number or they are a symbolic number. Now, let me begin by saying they cannot be a literal number. And I want to explain why they cannot be a literal number, why I believe that they are symbolic. We need to use the immediate context. The immediate context that we find, that is from Revelation chapter 7, from verse 1 to verse 3. All the things that are being explained there, they are symbols. The four corners of the earth, it's symbolic. The four winds, which is strife, is also symbolic. The sea, which is a great multitude, is symbolic. The earth, the trees, the seals, all these are symbols. Even if you go to Revelation chapter 16, it's also symbolic. The last part of Revelation chapter 16, you find that it's also explaining what the symbols that are there, that are being explained. And also the parallel of Revelation chapter 7, which is Revelation chapter 14, verses 1 to verse 5. We also find the symbols that are being portrayed there. The virgins, the lamb, all these are symbols. So the immediate context is showing us that almost everything that is there is symbolic. Then it will also be unfair to now take that number and literalize it when all the other things that are surrounding and supporting it are symbolic. That is the first point why the number cannot be literal. The second reason why the number cannot be literal is also that one in Revelation chapter 7, which tells us about the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, to those who are historians, who can follow the history of genealogies and nations, you can agree with me that we cannot point out the 12 tribes of Israel today. These guys, they are nowhere to be found. In other words, because of the persecution that happens, the migration that happened, the 12 tribes of Israel are almost all extinct. It's almost now difficult, to find the pure Israelite. I know that we have Israel today, we have Jordan, the Palestine, but you won't find the pure Israelites as they are being portrayed here. So if we say the 12 tribes of Israel, the question is, where are you going to find those 12 tribes of Israel? And when you look at Revelation chapter 7, when it is portraying the 12 sons of Jacob, the tribes of Israel, you also realize that according to Revelation chapter 7, the tribe of Dan is missing. If they are the 12 tribes of Israel, the children, the literal children of Jacob, why is Dan missing? And you also realize that Manasseh is also given a role among the 12. But we also find Joseph. And we know that Manasseh was the son of Joseph. So Manasseh is in Joseph, and we also have Joseph. What does that mean? And the tribe of Ephraim is also missing. So when you look at these, you can see that there is something that we need to see which is beyond the literal sense of these 12 tribes of Israel. When you look also the third reason why they cannot be literal is the logic behind the number 12,000. Because we are told that it's 12 from this tribe, 12,000 from this tribe, 12,000 from that tribe, and 12,000 from that tribe. And then the question is, yes, I know that it might be possible, but trying to apply logic, why strictly 12,000 of all the tribes of Israel? So you can see that there is something that is being explained, and it seems like the number 12, it is very common in the Bible. It's very common, so no wonder why they are using maybe 144,000. Maybe it's 12 times 12,000. I'm trying to, it's just a speculation. Maybe 12 representing the 12 tribes of Israel, and the 12 representing the 12 apostles, and then 1,000. 1,000 was the unit of the military of the Israelite, army. When you read from Numbers 31 verses 4 to verse 6, you find that. So it could be because remember the 144,000, these ones, they are not yet in heaven, which means that they are a church that is being fighting spiritual battles at the end of time. So it is like a military army of God's kingdom, the 144,000. So it could be 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles, and 1,000 representing, them being militant. Now, I also believe that the 144,000 is the great multitude that we also find in the preceding verses in Revelation chapter 7. And let me explain why I believe that the 144,000 is also the great multitude. I'm applying this from the chiasmic structure of Revelation. I want you to see the sequence of vision that we find in Revelation chapter 7. In Revelation chapter 7, when we read from verse 1 to verse 3, John sees, that is a vision. Then from verse 4 to verse 8, he hears. Then from verse 9 to verse 17, he also sees. So the sequence of the vision, he sees, then he hears, and then he sees. So what he hears is what he sees. This is how it is structured. So in verse 4 to verse 8, John hears the number of those who were sealed. He hears the number 144,000. And when he turns to look, he sees a great multitude that no man could number. So the great multitude that he sees is the same people or the group of the people that he have heard. So it was audition first and then vision. That is how it is structured. And some people now will ask, now how does it make sense? He hears 144,000, but when he sees a great multitude. So it can be the same group of people. But if you go to Revelation chapter 5, you see the same also, sequence being portrayed there. In Revelation chapter 5, if you read verse 5, John, here we are told that he hears about a lion, the lion of the tribe of Judah. He's hearing, the lion of the tribe of Judah who has conquered. But when he turns to look, that is in verse 6, what does he see? He sees a lamb. Is that lamb different from the lion? No, it's the same thing. That is one thing that you need to understand about Revelation. You need to study it carefully because some of the things that are being portrayed there, they might not make sense, but they make sense because they are symbolic. So John hears about the lion of the tribe of Judah who is a conqueror. But when he turns to look, he sees the lamb. That same lamb that he sees is the same lion that is what he has heard. So applying that expression in Revelation chapter 7, then it also fits and makes sense that John hears the number of those who have been sealed. 144,000. But when he turns to look, he sees a great multitude that no man could number. So that great multitude is probably the 144,000. And also remember, we said chapter 7 is an answer to chapter 6 verse 17. Behold, the great day of the Lord comes. Who shall be able to stand? So we now need to see those who are standing. And where do we find them? Revelation chapter 7 verse 9. When John sees now, a great multitude which is coming from all nations, tribes, tongues and kindreds, he says, I saw them stood. They are standing. So this multitude who are standing before the throne of God is the same group of people that have been asked in chapter 6 verse 17, who shall be able to stand? And we know that these are the people that are living on the knife edge of eternity just prior to the coming of Christ, that have passed through the tribulation, that have been redeemed from the earth without facing death. So the great multitude is the 144,000. I want us also to look the parallels between the 144,000 and the great multitude, why I believe they are the same group. Number one, they both pass through the time of the great tribulation. They are all passing through the time of the great tribulation. From chapter 6, we are told that there's a tribulation that is happening there, and they are all passing through the time of tribulation. Even Revelation chapter 1, it tells us, when Michael stands, there shall be a great time of trouble, and those who are found written in the book of life shall be saved. So they are all passing through the great time of tribulation. When we read Revelation chapter 7, verse 14, it tells us that these are they who came out of the great tribulation. Now, this one, we also need to understand it. Learn to contextualize. Because some people, when they look at that statement, they came out of the great tribulation, they believe that, okay, these are the people, from the time of Adam who have been redeemed. And they say the tribulation are all the challenges, and the persecutions that we encountered in all the generations. But the language, applying, semantics and the syntax, it does not apply there. They are coming out of the great tribulation. That phrase, the great tribulation, must tell us that this is a special tribulation. Because if you say everyone, that multitude is everyone who has been redeemed, then I will now ask the question. There are some people that who have been redeemed, but they did not encounter a great tribulation. Yes, they might have faced challenges here and there, but not a great tribulation. They did not encounter a great tribulation. Many people who have been redeemed. So the question is, how can we now say this is a group of people of all the generations when these ones are coming out of the great tribulation? So I believe that phrase, great tribulation, is referring to a certain group of people, which cannot be the whole saints, multitude of saints that have been redeemed. So that verse 14 is also important for us to understand that this is a special group of people. And I believe when you're now applying, the analogy of the Bible, looking at chapter 7 in its totality, you can see that this great multitude is actually those ones who have been sealed in the first verses of chapter 7. So the great multitude is actually the same as the 144,000 because they are all coming through a great tribulation. The other thing is that the 144,000 is the end time church on earth. These guys who are being sealed, they are still on planet earth. But the great multitude is the end time church in heaven. So the difference is 144,000, the number that he hears, they are still on earth and they are sealed for translation. And then later on, we now see the great multitude. The same number that has been sealed is now standing before the throne of God in heaven. They are now standing there as people who have been redeemed from the earth. So which means that the 144,000 is the church militant, the church that is still at war, fighting with the beast, and they have overcome. As we are told in Revelation chapter 14, they have overcome. And then the great multitude is that same group which was the militant, but now is the church triumphant. So the difference is where they are and the wars that they are fighting. While they are on earth, they are still the church militant, but now as they are standing in heaven, they are now the church triumphant. They have overcome. The fourth thing that I also want to see, which is a parallel, is that they are all serving God. We are told that the 144,000 in chapter 7, verse 3, they are servants of God. The great multitude, when we read Revelation chapter 7, verse 15, they are also serving God. So it's the same group of people who are also servants of God, who are serving Him. So Revelation chapter 7 does not comprise of the redeemed from all the ages. These are the first fruits. As I have said, Revelation chapter 7 is answering chapter 6 verse 17, who shall be able to stand. It's an interlude. So the rest of the chapter is trying to explain that group of the people that are going to pass through the great time of trouble, and they are going to be translated without facing death. That is the same group that we see here. The complete human family, we find them in Revelation chapter 19. That is where we now see the whole group, the whole multitude from all the ages, from Adam, that are standing before the throne of God, and they have been redeemed. But let me put a disclaimer and say, knowing that the 144,000 is not literal, is not a passport for people now to live in complacence, because I know that usually people who are pro the 144,000 being a literal number, they are afraid that if we don't say it's a literal number, then people are going to relax and say, so I have a chance to be saved. So they want to stand with it being a literal number because they're trying to use, a way of scaring people to say, it's a very small number, so you need to, to work hard for you to be saved. But I don't want us to apply, the Bible that way. Let's allow the Bible to explain itself. We don't need to use some kind of different, methods to make people be afraid, of being lost. Remember, fear will not take you to heaven. Because one thing that you need to understand is that when it comes to matters of salvation, probability as well as ratios, they don't work with God. It's not about, okay, if it's not a literal number, so which means that the probability that I can make it to heaven is high, or the ratios. God does not work with ratios. Even if they were to be the literal number, it's not about the ratios to say I might not be there. You need to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. It's all about, am I right before God? So we don't need to look around and start, being afraid of the number. Just ask yourself as an individual, the way that I'm living, am I getting ready for translation? So this is the same group of people that we are told in Revelation chapter 14 that they have got two characters. They keep the commandments of God and they have the faith of Jesus. So that group is a group of the people who are righteous that are going to stand, in this earth without an intercessor. After Michael stands, after Jesus ceases his work in the heavenly sanctuary, that is the same group that is going to pass through the time of trouble without an intercessor. They will rely on the merits of Christ. They will be wearing the righteousness of Christ. That is the only thing that is going to make them pass through this time, and they are going to make it to the very end. So who are the 144,000? It's a very special group of people that are going to remain faithful to God, even in the trying times when they are suffering for their faith, but they are not going to compromise until the very end. They will not be killed. They are going to be alive when Jesus shall return. And that group is not literal. It's not 144,000 literal. It's symbolic, symbolizing a great multitude that we find in Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 to verse 17. A great multitude that have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb, and they are now standing before the Lamb and they are singing the songs of redemption. That is my little explanation of who these people are, the 144,000 folks. I hope you are being blessed. And if you are, please don't be selfish. Share with others. Invite others, to subscribe to this channel, because every Friday I'll be uploading a new short video to tackle those passages or verses that are problematic in the Christian community, in the Christian society, and I will be trying to use the Bible itself to explain so that all of us, we can come to the knowledge of the truth. So like this video if it is blessing you, and also remember to press the notification bell for the new uploads. With these words, may you be blessed.